What's going on? Welcome to Victims and Villains. If you are new to this channel, we talk about mental health through pop culture. My name is Captain Nostalgia. Today we are jumping into the waters of the documentary Sharksploitation. Sharksploitation is the definitive look at how film has portrayed sharks in both right and wrong, both seriously cultural like Jaws to the more ludicrous takes like Sharknado. Side note, does Sharknado hold the title for worst movie ever? Possibly. Check out our Bad Movie Showdown episode of Abyss Gazing. I'll provide a link in the show notes below, or you can stay after the end of this video to watch it right here on YouTube. So Stephen Scarlata is the writer and director behind this film, and one of the things that I really loved about this film is how engrossing the subject matter actually is. Not only is it talking to filmmakers like Joe Dante and Roger Corman that have made Sharksploitation or Sharksploitation adjacent films, but it's also talking to marine biologists and oceanographers and people that actually have studied sharks and underwater marine biology as well, to kind of give the definitive look at how sharks are portrayed both correctly and incorrectly in film. One of the things that I really admired about this film that I knew going into it was I knew about like the juggernaut that Jaws was at the time of its release in 1975, and really also how big of a cultural landmark it was in terms of copycat films. Not just here in America, but like worldwide, like to the point where there were actually lawsuits because of how closely other countries copied the first two films in the Jaws franchise. Maybe it's just me, but I typically don't watch shark documentaries outside of Shark Week. And so a lot of the quote unquote knowledge that I have of sharks do come from films like Jaws and like other films that are copycats of it, so to say. So I feel like there is this kind of unspoken thing that we think that movies like Jaws, Deep Blue Sea, The Meg, like all of these big Hollywood films are teaching us accurate facts about these predators. And what I think this movie made me really appreciative of was the fact that it really kind of debunked a lot of those things that films that have taught me quote unquote science, not real. And I get that. Like I don't put my stock in everything that Hollywood produces as gospel, but you know, what are you going to do? One of the things that I really loved about this movie was the variety of guests that it offered and kind of insights into the knowledge of both, you know, film historians or genre historians or people that actually directed these movies or wrote them or produced them and kind of talk about the cultural impacts of them, but also how that was juxtaposed to having marine biologists and people that have actually studied sharks and ocean wildlife. Like I was just kind of fascinated by how Scarlata was able to balance that. Obviously, when you think about sharks in film, your mind kind of tends to go to one of, you know, a couple places, and it's probably going to be Jaws, probably going to be Deep Blue Sea, it's probably going to be Sharknado, and it's probably going to be The Meg. And one of the things that I think this film does kind of well is that it highlights those, but it feels like in certain portions of the explanations that it kind of just tends to sit a little bit too much or too heavy on these particular landmark films. And that's kind of my issue with this film, is that I really wish that if it would have gone that route, that this probably would have been better suited to be a 6-part miniseries that is like akin to like cursed films or, you know, any Netflix docu-series that they've done over the years. I feel like kind of focusing a little bit too heavily on things like Jaws or Sharknado, like it becomes a point in this movie where Jaws is really all we talk about, Sharknado is really all we talk about. There's parts in here that actually are kind of briefly explain about how the Sci-Fi Network actually got started with doing some of its content and programming that it actually eventually led to Sharknado and the Asylum. I don't have any problem with those portions of the film. I just, for the medium of a film and a film that is under 2 hours, it just feels like they spent a little bit too much time focusing on these portions of the history, and I really would have loved to kind of see maybe this project done as a 6-part miniseries instead. All in all, I think this movie is really awesome. So let's run this through the Rorschach rating scale. I'm going to go ahead and give Sharksploitation a 4 out of 5. I think this is a really strong documentary. Definitely top 5 documentaries of the year that I have seen. For 1, for 2, this probably has to be the definitive documentary on the subjects of sharks in film, but also at the same time, the way that it digs its teeth into actual real life subject matter, I really love as well. Documentaries are always really hard to do a mental health section for, so I'm going to go ahead and skip it because the mental health section I want to do actually dives into spoilers in like the last 15 minutes of this movie. So if you or someone you know is struggling with suicide, addiction, self-harm, or depression, click the links in the show notes below to check out our mental health resource library. Sharksploitation comes to Shudder exclusively beginning July 21st. If you guys need more shark content, stick to the end of this video where you guys can check out our episodes on Bad Movie Showdown as well as Jaws. And in the show notes below, you guys will also find links to more podcasts, more movie reviews, all of our social media, Patreon, and that subscribe button. So until next time, stay out of the water.